Eddie Alvarez, a former lightweight champion of the UFC and Bellator, appears to only be starting to prepare his post-fight future as a manager for MMA talent. Why? Well, because if there's one fighter who understands the business side of the sport, it's Alvarez. But what advice is he giving to all these fighters, and do they even really need it? Here's everything we know. First off, is Alvarez even worthy of being a consultant? As a matter of fact, Alvarez joined the UFC as a free agent in 2012 after finishing out his deal with Bellator, and Bellator invoked its contractual right to match that offer. But Bellator's matching offer, according to Alvarez and his legal counsel, wasn't enough to match the UFC's offer. After some legal disputes, Bellator and Alvarez finally came to terms with his contract. After that, Alvarez fought for Bellator once more, winning the lightweight championship by defeating Michael Chandler. When Scott Coker took over as Bellator's president after Bjorn Rebney left, one of the first things he did was release Alvarez so he could sign with the UFC. Alvarez competed in fights for the UFC from 2014 to 2017 and won matches while fighting for the promotion, but he never successfully defended his lightweight title. In 2018, he left the UFC and joined ONE Championship as a free agent, and after that, Alvarez and ONE split up into September. He went on from one promotion to the next like a volleyball being hit back and forth, but it wasn't all for nothing. Alvarez learned this isn't how it should be for fighters, and that's why he's against resigning and becoming a free agent instead. But that's not all. Let's talk about why exactly Alvarez is against resigning. When you stop and think about it, Alvarez is right when he says that fighters shouldn't resign with the company before their deal expires. According to Alvarez's philosophy, let's say you have a 6-fight contract and you have to contribute just as much value to yourself in that organization as possible throughout those 6 fights. In that case, leaving the contract makes you more valuable outside of it. You can't let a company re-sign you for another 6 or 8 bouts when your contract expires with only 1 or 2 fights remaining. Alvarez believes you shouldn't do that because you're literally killing yourself that way, but he totally understands why fight promotions want athletes to sign a new contract before their old deal expires. It's smart business. Moving on, why is it a smart business decision? Would you have done anything differently if you'd owned and operated more than one business? No, you wouldn't, because you'd want to buy your products for the lowest possible cost and sell them for the highest possible price, which is what the most successful businesses do. They seek out fighters as inexpensively as they can with the intention of selling them off for a profit to a broader market later. Alvarez is fully aware of all this and the financial aspects of the situation, but now that he's been through it, he doesn't understand why other fighters fall for it like he did. Resigning before a fighter's contract ends in reality only keeps them from realizing their worth and what the open market would offer them in a proper negotiation with a promoter. That's one of the many reasons why Alvarez advises against it. Next up, what would Alvarez do differently? If it were up to Alvarez today, he'd try to figure out what he's worth first. And when you think about it, every fighter should do the same and know their worth. At the end of the day, nobody truly cares about your value more than yourself. Alvarez believes that fighters should worry more than anybody else about this and should decide their numbers so they can bargain properly. What makes Alvarez's advice valuable is that he has followed it himself. He experimented with free agency when he could, and it seems like it helped him financially throughout his career. Since Eddie Alvarez is a free agent again, he wants other fighters to follow his example and realize their importance in this sport. The former UFC and Bellator lightweight champion wants to finish his career in the United States after parting with ONE Championship earlier this month. He wants the upcoming generation of fighters to benefit from his knowledge now that he's free to talk with other companies and is willing to return to the UFC or Bellator if the price is right. Let's talk more about if Alvarez would consult fighters. Alvarez claims that he would love the chance to talk with future fighters and teach them the ins and outs of the financial side of the sport, because after establishing a reputation for themselves or winning a world championship, no one values free agency or recognizes its importance. He believes fighters will complain that they can't get out of a deal or that they can't do this or that, but all the fighters really need to do is think about the first day they signed that contract and how happy they were with it. As Alvarez said on the MMA Hour podcast, the trick is to add value and not allow a company to take advantage of you. While several fighters have made their contract statuses extremely public throughout the years, Alvarez is confused as to why there's such a disconnect between the fighter's management, and the company they compete for. Alvarez genuinely thinks that staring in the mirror is where it all starts. It's debatable whether or not Alvarez has some pent-up hate towards the promotion, but it should definitely be geared back at the manager or the fighter themselves. Alvarez is truly confused about why fighters keep re-signing, because he considers being able to determine what you're worth to be the biggest benefit of free agency. Not to mention, Alvarez isn't playing the blame game. Alvarez doesn't really hold the businesses responsible because, as we've already discussed, if you had a business with mouths to feed, you'd probably act in the same way and cut corners occasionally to maximize profits. Considering that Nate Diaz just completed his UFC contract, Alvarez thinks a Legends bout with the Stockton, California fighter would be an interesting one because it's unusual to have two well-known fighters who aren't affiliated with a major company. Alvarez said that during one of his free agent periods, he spoke with lightweight Michael Chandler, a two-time Bellator opponent and current UFC fighter, about trying to set up a trilogy fight because after 2 thrilling bouts, they both have one victory and another fight between them would be awesome. Finally, will an Alvarez versus Chandler rematch happen? To be fair, both Nate and Alvarez are free agents right now, so that has a higher chance of happening because this rarely ever happens in MMA. But at a certain point, Alvarez and Michael Chandler had the same situation too, and Alvarez even called Chandler to ask him not to sign with anyone. Instead, he suggested that the two of them go for a walk inside an office and talk about having another fight. Why? Because Alvarez believes that it's better to approach a promoter as a pair since both boxers could earn a lot more money that way. Alvarez is sort of the GOAT on the MMA business side, don't you think? When Alvarez proposed a fight to Chandler face-to-face with no promoters, no companies, and no managers in the mix, it seemed like a great idea to Chandler at the time, and it felt like it might actually happen. But then Alvarez didn't hear from him, and he heard he had resigned from Bellator. This obviously made Alvarez feel discouraged, but then again, you can't hope that your rival will become your friend just because of a walk into the office. Here's some other related news. First off, Khabib's manager asked for $50 million for Khabib's return. A $50 million shot was fired by Khabib Nurmagomedov's manager on his behalf in 2018, and Dana White's reaction was funny to say the least. Today, as the manager of his known Eagle FC organization, Khabib Nurmagomedov is in a position to pay fighters. Khabib had a 29-0 record when he announced his retirement from MMA, but maybe that wasn't enough for Dana White to consider giving him $50 million for a fight. Rightfully so, because who would? In the most recent Khabib news, the former lightweight champion has been congratulating Islam Makhachev for dethroning Charles Oliveira at UFC 280 to become the new champion of the weight class. Maybe the UFC could consider Khabib's $50 million demand from 4 years ago. You never know. Finally, will Dana White take the offer? Nurmagomedov's manager Abdelaziz recently stated that his fighter needs to receive $50 million for his upcoming match. During the UFC 230 post-fight news conference, a sarcastic White mocked their remarks, saying that they know what's realistic for them, so they already know the answer to that question, but he admitted that it's fun to say though. But let's be real, Nurmagomedov earned $2 million at UFC 229. Pay-per-view points and guidelines compliance payments are excluded from this, plus the NSAC commission gave the Eagle half his pay, withholding the other half until a judgment about his penalty was reached. While McGregor received his $3 million payment in full, the NSAC acknowledges that they would have done the same if they had been provided with the same video evidence in advance. In short, $50 million for a fighter is a bit of an exaggerated figure, but do you think it can happen? Let us know in the comments below. And that's it for today. If you liked the video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more awesome videos just like this.